Hello, everyone, and welcome to Magma Rage's episode 61. I am Deb, and I've got Pandemonia here with me as always. We've got a lot to cover for today's show. There's been a lot of news. There's some type changes that happened. We're going to be talking about some decks like the Magma Zoo and Malygos Druid. We've got our Magma Rage's tip, of course. There's some esports news, but we need to get, first of all, into the news that just broke a couple hours ago. The new expansion for Hearthstone is going to be the Boomsday project. Ooh, I almost got that wrong. Dr. Boom is back, and he's bringing with him a whole assortment of new gadgets and science to our lives.
Woo, science.
So, first of all, just on the theme, are you excited for some Dr. Boom themed stuff? From the reveal video, did you like it? All of that, you know?
The reveal video, they're gone with the cringy, super cheesy vibe. I kind of enjoyed it, but it was also very lame, right? But I mean, that's obviously that's kind of what they're going for.
Yeah.
But I'm quite excited. I mean, this is kind of a flashback a bit. With mechs, it's a flashback to Hearthstone's first expansion, Goblins and Gnomes.
Yeah.
When we first saw good old Dr. Boom.
Yeah.
When everyone thought he was bad.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw, like, Soddle was making some joke about this expansion's gonna suck. We need to wait for Trogzor's expansion.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I really liked the reveal video. I thought they did a really great job. I mean, the one thing people were curious about is how would they do without Ben Brode there for the reveal videos. I thought they did pretty well. I thought, Dave Kosak and all that carried it really well. I thought they pulled off the whole cringy science thing really well. It almost feels like it suited them more doing that than it would have if Brode was involved in the cringy science thing, right? Because you can't, Brode doesn't really come off as like a cringy scientist. But anyway, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was maybe a little bit long, honestly, because I watched it at work and I was like, wow, this is quite long. But other than that, I mean, I think it was pretty great. But people don't want to just hear our opinions on that. They want to hear our opinions on the new cards, and they want to hear about those. So let's dive straight into that. First up, we have a new mechanic and a new card. Do you want to tell us all about that, Pandemonia?
So the new card is... the new mechanic is called Magnetic, and the card is Spider Bomb. It's a 3-mana 2/2 Hunter minion, which is a mech, and it has Death Rattle, destroy a random enemy minion, and it has the keyword Magnetic. So the way this is going to work is think of zombies, think of Rexar zombies. So you can either play the minion as a 3-mana 2/2 with its effect, or you can play it essentially as like a spell enchantment to fuse with, I think it has to be with another mech.
Yeah.
Basically buff that mech with those abilities.
Yeah, so in the video they spoke about playing this next to, they said adjacent to another mech, so it's an interesting question as well as if you place it if you have another minion in the way, does that affect Magnetic? I'm not actually sure on that.
Yeah, we don't know much about the fine mechanics of it.
And do both the minions have to have Magnetic for it to work? I mean, that's a interesting thing.
No, I think it's just a mech.
Okay, so if it's just a mech in general, then you can play something like Nightmare Amalgam and then play Spider Bomb, and you're going to be getting, essentially you're going to be bundling those two cards into one minion, and you end up with a 5/6 with Death Rattle to destroy a random enemy minion. So that's kind of the mechanic in general. Before we talk about this card specifically, do you like the mechanic? Or at least your first impression on it?
My first impression, it seems like a very meh mechanic. Like, it seems very vanilla, right? Like, literally just put a bunch of stats, like just add another minion to another minion. It seems very boring. I don't know if that's the right word to describe it.
Well, I like that I like it for two reasons. One, a return to the mech tribe. And a kind of mech tribal mechanic, although that can be a bit of an issue in that it usually means that only certain classes actually manage to make it work, because only certain classes manage to pull off these tribal deck styles. And secondly, I like it because you're kind of giving buffs in an interesting way that the buffs can also be minions. And it's dependent on your board state as to whether they're a buff or minion. So it's not like having a choose one. It's one that you have to kind of set up with either positioning, if it is positioning based, or even just, you know, maybe you want to trade off your mech so you can play the Spider Bomb without it being magnetic or something like that. I think those are elements that make the mechanic quite interesting, and I definitely think seeing how it pans out with the positioning is going to be pretty important.
And also how it works. Like if it's kind of if it's like a permanent thing, or like I'm trying to work out like and then how does silence work with it? Because does it count as being part of it, or does it, like, you know, does silence remove that buff? Because it will all depend. Does silence
remove the stats, right? Like
exactly.
If you silence the minion with that Spider Bomb, it's magnetized itself to, it would obviously remove the death row, but would it remove the stats is the question.
And that's the thing.
That's definitely an interesting question.
And then that will obviously, I think a lot of those sort of interactions will determine how good or bad it is, right? Because if it's that susceptible to silence, it might not be that good, right?
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at Spider Bomb specifically now. So 3 mana 2/2 mech with magnetic, destroy a random enemy minion. 3 mana to give a minion 2/2 if we look at it from that context, and specifically only mechs.
I mean, 3 mana for 2/2 stats is obviously very underwhelming. But the death rattle is a deadly shot.
Yeah.
So you're basically paying 3 mana for a deadly shot that is a lot more situational in the fact that a lot of the times it's going to be harder to control when it happens, right?
Yeah. I mean, the ideal scenario for Spider Bomb is you play it on your opponent has, let's say, 2 8/8s on the board. You play it on your 6/6 mech. You trade that into the 8/8s to kill it, and then the death rattle will kill off the other one, right? That's the ideal scenario. Or something along those lines where you can trade it off into a minion and leave only the one big minion isolated on the board. But as you mentioned, a lot of the times it's your opponent that usually is the one killing off your minions rather than you, especially after you've just buffed it, right, with stats.
Yeah.
Usually if you buff something, you want it to stick around, and that's kind of weird here with Spider Bomb.
So, I mean, obviously this is the first one we've seen. This one particularly, I'm not, like, we'll have to see if, obviously, if Fuse and the mechs become a thing. Obviously, it become a tribal vibes again. But I'm a bit skeptical of how good Fuse as a whole is going. I mean, magnetic is going to be. Yeah, magnetic is going to be.
One thing I want to note about this card is the whole bomb theme. So if we look at like boombots as bombs and this whole death rattle to deal damage or do something to a random enemy. I mean, in this case, it's enemy minion. I hope that's not too consistent a theme, because it does introduce a lot of kind of swingy RNG that at the moment is not that necessarily that prevalent. So that's the only thing that Spider Bomb slightly concerns me from that perspective.
You miss losing to random rag shots or
just boombots. I mean, we all know how annoying boombots were for their RNG, not just their like power, right? That big variance between 1 and 4 is huge, and the variance on something like this, destroying a 1/1 versus destroying 8/8 is also huge sometimes.
Fair enough.
So moving on to the next thing, we have also legendary spells being introduced for every class. So first of all, the first time that they've introduced legendary spells, with that little caveat, if you saw in the corner, 99.972% accurate or something like that, because you could argue that quests were spells, but arguably they were also not. So that's an interesting debate. So these are the first, like, let's say, non-quest spells. And we're going to be starting off here with Myra's Unstable Element. Do you want to tell us exactly what this card does?
So it's a 5-mana legendary rogue spell, and it reads, draw the rest of your deck. And so the reason why I'm grinning so much is because we were chatting quite a bit about this, and, you know, Dib being the rogue expert, he does not like this card in the slightest.
Like rogue spells. There's so much potential there. You can do lots of cool things. By making it legendary, you're playing around it's too OP with prep to a certain extent because it's less consistent to draw. But what the heck is this? Like, they need to print some cards with insane synergy for this to be any good. I mean, off air you were talking about like printing win conditions, but if they print a win condition for this, you know, where if you draw all your deck,
it'd be too good.
It would either be way too good, because you just draw this and win the game. That's stupid. They don't want to do that. Or if it's a win condition that's based on drawing lots of cards in your deck, well, I'll just play Miracle Rogue instead of this. Thanks. Like, how often is this ever going to be better than Sprint? You burn half the cards in your deck at like
more than half
rate.
probably a lot of times, right?
Yeah, like I don't. And when do you ever, if the game is going quite late, really want to, like, let's say you have the best case scenario, you have 2 cards in hand, 8 cards in your deck, so you're not burning anything. Do you really want to go to Fatigue next turn as a rogue?
So basically, this card is, I mean, it initially looks quite terrible, but I mean, unless there's some synergies or like obviously with more cards explored, unless there's some great interaction or some great combo that makes this work, you know, this is obviously a bit questionable.
Yeah, no, man, we're not going to say a card is trash or a card is good yet. You know, it's impossible to say with the context of 5 cards, I think it is, from this set. So we're definitely going to hold off on... These are just kind of our first impressions. And first impression, I am not happy with this as the Legendary Rogue spell. I like the spell idea. And the big thing that this kind of hints to me is if they print... cards to facilitate this, you know, cards like Felderai Strider that are so good that encourage you to draw more cards from your deck. Those are just going to be better in Miracle Rogue more often than not, and I'm not sure why we would play this. So I'll be happy if they print cards to support Miracle Rogue, but yeah. I'm not so stoked about Myra's unstable element. Next up, we have Electra, Storm Surge. So going along with the theme of legendary spells in every class, we've also got a kind of scientist. I'm guessing this is going to be for every class. I suppose they didn't really confirm that part of it, but we're guessing, you know, they spoke about Dr. Boom bringing along his the best scientists, and I'm guessing there's going to be one for every class, likely to be a minion, you know, for thematic purposes, obviously. And the shaman one we have here is Electra Storm Surge. So Electra Storm Surge is a 3-mana, 3/3 legendary elemental with Battle Cry. Your next spell this turn costs twice. So in shaman, what are some of the combos we're actually thinking about for this?
I mean, Farsight is not bad, right?
Sure. I mean, you get to draw 2 cards and
2 cards and get the mass reduction.
Yeah.
I mean, things like Lightning Storm potentially is not bad as well. I mean, it becomes essentially a 6-mana Flame Strike.
Yeah.
So I mean, that like, I mean, you can use it as a board clear. I mean, even I think it's kind of similar to Murmuring Elemental in the way that it's got some random utility. Whether it's good enough to see play, like it'll be interesting to see, because I mean, if you just combo this with like Healing Rain, it's pretty good, or with, like I say,
Lightning Storm,
Lightning Storm, you know, it's got a lot of like nice, but the question is how often will it actually be good, right?
Yeah, and I mean, for like Shadowhawk decks, that's the deck where this immediately... Shadowhawk or Elemental decks, right? Those are the 2 decks where this kind of immediately sticks out. Elemental decks, you'd maybe want to play this with cards like Lightning Storm, those, or possibly Burn. So if you went like Electra Storm Surge and double Lightning Bolt, you know, just for efficient damage, that could be pretty good. I think it will overload you twice if they cast twice.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm curious how that works. Do you think it will overload you twice?
I think so.
So,
which makes the whole Lightning Storm thing a lot worse as well.
Because what's it? Overload for 4 afterwards feels a little bit worse.
Yeah, I mean, using this and Earthen Might is pretty good in an elemental deck. Yeah. You get 2 cards, you buff the thing 4/4.
So 5-mana 7/7.
Yes, a 5-mana 7/7 that draws you 2 gets you 2 random elementals.
That's not bad. Now that you put it like that seems pretty legit.
I actually, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm getting sold that this actually could be a pretty decent card. I mean, these 3-mana utility 3/3s are okay. My question is also how this works with Murmuring Elemental. So if you play Murmuring Elemental and then Electra Storm Surge, and then you play a spell, do you get 4 copies of that spell? Do you get to play 2 spells? How does that work?
No, I mean, if we remember how Bran the interactions with Bran, right?
Yeah.
You didn't get to cast it. It would be the same target. So,
Yeah, okay.
like,
So would it cost
so
the spell 3 times? 4
four times.
times?
Well, because, well, double your battle cry. So each battle cry will trigger cost twice. So it should be 4 times. That's kind of what my gut tells me, but we'll have to see.
I feel like it's going to be 3 times because I feel like it's just adding +1 cost to the casting of the spell. But and if it
Oh,
does that
not
twice,
double.
yeah, it's not. Yeah, that's kind of how I see it
Oh,
interacting.
yeah,
But
so yeah, 3, maybe. Yeah, you might be right.
anyway, these are kind of fringe scenarios. I think the card's quite interesting, and I'm going to be interested. I think it's an interesting way they've done it, right? It's like a very interesting battle cry on this minion, and definitely something that if this is the bar they're setting for the legendary minions going forward, they can definitely lead to some interesting deck building. I mean, we're just discussing this now, and like we've gone crazy on all the different options, so I think that's pretty interesting. And then when it comes to the hero, when it comes to these scientists, the one that we kind of got spoiled a little bit was they did something similar to what they did with Hagatha last time, and it looks like Dr. Boom is unsurprisingly going to be the hero card of this expansion. You know, I mean, Hagatha was kind of the central character of the Witchwood, and Dr. Boom is obviously the central character of Boomsday. Of the Boomsday project. So it looks like he is going to be a warrior legendary hero. That's all we really know about it at this point. Did it have a mana cost? I actually need to double check.
Nah, I don't think so. I think it was just a generic like gem.
Yeah.
Much like that. So what we suspect is basically from the so far is that every class will have a legendary minion except warrior, where it will have Dr. Boom, right? We don't like. It seems to kind of make sense, and then
Yeah.
you know the legendary spell should probably be related to the scientist. It will be the scientist spell.
Yeah,
and then
it seems I'm guessing he's going to be well. We see Doctor something Mad Genius, and the picture is of Dr. Boom. So
it's going to be Dr. Boom, Mad Genius.
Dr. Boom, Mad Genius. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm quite sure.
Yeah.
In terms of what he will do, like I mean, obviously we don't know much about it. I mean, I'm gonna take a guess that it might be like with regards to the boom bots. So it might be like 2 mana, throw 2 or 3 bombs, you know, in a random places, or some in a boom bot, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned off air as well, we have seen that with the Tavern Brawl, I think it was, where you got to be Dr. Boom.
Yeah.
And you know, maybe that's something they're toying with. I'm hoping the hero power is more interesting than that, and that it's different to that. But I do kind of think it's not going to be a super control themed hero, right? Because if you look at what they did with Hagatha and Thrall, they're very different in the kind of decks they work with. And I think they will make this a hero card that's very different to Garrosh. And Garrosh is something played in more of the kind of control warrior decks. But they could also go, you know, even more extreme control warrior, or kind of control themed. As I just imagine it's something that would be very different style deck to the one you would play Garrosh in.
Sure, for sure.
And okay, so the other cards we have to talk about, there is the
Omega.
Yeah, the Omega. I mean, is Omega like the theme they're going with? Yeah, for these things, I don't know.
It's kind of what they called it in the video, but like it's one of those ones where it's not an official, it's not a keyword like magnetic.
Yeah.
But it kind of has it's got like a central concept, and the whole concept is basically. Well, the one we see here, Omega Defender, it's a 4 mana 2/6 minion with taunt. Battle Cry, if you have 10 mana crystals, gain +10 attack. So the whole concept of the Omega is that you know, before you have 10 mana crystals, it's just a normal card, and then at 10 mana it kind of does something special. But we've just seen Battle Cry, you know, there's the possibility that it could be a death rattle, it could be, you know, it could be other implements in other ways. But the whole idea is that it's a 4 mana. It gets a little bit better, obviously, later on. If you draw it later in the game, it's a 4 mana 10/6.
Yeah,
and the video obviously makes the whole meme of killing Deathwing.
Yeah, I mean, if we base it purely on this card, then what we can assume is that they're maybe not as great for their mana curve. I mean, this is essentially comparable to Stegodon. In terms of being a 4 mana 2/6 with taunt, that's not something you would put in your deck most of the time, but they scale better into the late game than those kind of cards. So that's kind of the upside, is that if you play them in the late game. But and the other important thing to note is that it's basically, we think it's just based on having 10 mana crystals. So if you played 2 of these on turn 10, you would get 2 12 6s with taunt.
Yeah, they'd both be Omega.
Yes. I'm a big fan of the concept of this, having these cards that scale. I think it's important for them that I think what they're trying to do here is have cards that scale into the late game that are not just hero cards. Because the way we see all these control decks generally playing now is with hero cards or a big combo or some kind of big single finisher, right? And I mean, I would argue any of those decks that have that big single finisher are usually combo decks more than... like Shadowwalk Shaman are more combo decks than they are really control decks. So most of these control decks, they don't have like these big finisher minions or anything like that. They're all kind of based on hero cards, and maybe these are just some other options for deck that don't necessarily want to maybe go late, but don't necessarily want to play the hero cards.
So I really like this concept and this idea, and now obviously we have to just wait and see like how many more cards they release and like what they are. But I have I'm willing to almost put money that there'll be at least one that's like crazy good that will basically see it'll be like, I think there'll be a neutral one that we'll see play in a lot of decks. I'm already betting there's going to be at least one really good one.
Yeah. I think that's a fairly solid guess. I do think that it's a pretty good concept, but a concept that I'm even more excited about is projects. So they spoke a little bit about projects. These are kind of spells, I'm guessing it's going to be for every class that have a symmetrical effect that affects both players. In this case, we have Biology Project, a 1-mana common druid spell. Each player gains 2 mana crystals. So from our assumptions here, we're assuming it gives you full mana crystals, much like Nourish does when you choose the mana crystal option there. So Biology Project, essentially 1 mana to give yourself 1 extra mana crystal. Essentially an innovate, with what the innovate is now, except that the mana crystal is permanent, and the downside is you give your opponent mana crystals. And the big thing to note here is when you play this, you get 1 extra mana crystal that turn, and your opponent gets to use the 2 full mana crystals on their turn. So whilst you get a little bit more initiative to get ahead of the curve, your opponent's still going to have the same amount of mana, in fact more, to react with you, because they're going to gain a mana crystal naturally for their turn anyway, right? So either they'll be on the same mana crystals as you, or more still, depending on obviously who went first or who went second. So in that kind of context, Biology Project seems kind of weak, I think.
Yeah, I mean, symmetrical effects are very restrictive. Mainly, like you say, because you've committed mana for that effect. So then usually, your opponent gets to fully utilize the effect. Yeah. So the only real, I think, symmetrical effect that we've seen, saw a lot of play, was probably Cold Light Oracle in select decks. The rest of the symmetrical effects, like there's that druid one that makes the forest guide, and there was that druid. Oh, what was it? There was a 3-mana. It was a 3-mana one where you could choose to either each player drew a card or each player gained a mana crystal. It was like Druid of the something. It was
a Druid of the Grove or something.
Druid of the Grove, or it's
I know
something like that. And
it's
those
in
never
standard.
saw play.
It's in standard still. It's a classic card. Yeah. I think.
No, that one's not classic. No, it was rotated out.
Oh, okay. Anyway. Yeah.
But anyway, the point is that a lot of those didn't see play because, the turn you're playing it, you used all that mana, and then your opponent basically got the first chance to maximize their effect, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the big thing here with Biology Project and with most of these kind of symmetrical effects is that you need to be able to use them in some kind of interesting combo way, right? Yeah. I mean, we saw Cold Light Oracle. The benefit of that card is that you're drawing so many cards. Sometimes you burn your opponent, sure, or you are a mill deck where you want your opponent to draw cards, in which case the downside is not a downside. But most of the times it's the case that the upside to you is more important than the downside of giving your opponent that too, right? So Cold Light Oracle is a terrible tempo card, but it's great in decks where you need to search aggressively for your combo pieces, and that's kind of what Biology Project I think is kind of meant to be as well. It's meant to be something for some kind of combo deck. The big question is just, what can you exploit by getting to more mana crystals what can you exploit better than your opponents by being at more mana crystals? Ultimate Infestation is one thing that jumps out.
Malygos, and for me,
yeah.
Auctioneer as well. Auctioneer, it's a cheap spell that gives you mana.
Yeah, I mean,
so
the thing to me is it needs to be some way to also exploit the fact that you have the mana crystals next turn as well. Otherwise, you may as well just play Innovate, right?
Yeah, fair enough, yeah.
Because if it's Malygos, you can just play like Malygos, Innovate, Wrath, and that's the same thing. I mean, now you can kind of have 4 Innovates in your deck. So you could like Malygos, Innovate, Biology Project, Swipe. But come on, that's way too many cards to call that a realistic combo. So
sure, fair.
I think that's the one home that Biology Project might find in some kind of Druid combo. But I actually thinking about it more and more and comparing it to current Innovate, like which only sees one of in Malygos Druids. I'm not actually even convinced it'll see play there. But once again, something we need to wait to see more of the set to see how it pans out.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some cards that can actually gain effects based on the amount of mana crystals your opponent has or something like that. Then you can actually make use of it in some kind of synergistic way. So I mean, there's a couple things as well to note about the expansion. There's going to be a pre-order, but the pre-order is a little bit more complicated this time around.
So pre-orders, and it's actually really cool to see that them do these things. Is they actually have 2 pre-order options, and just to clear up, it's confirmed you will be able to actually buy both of them. Like you can buy each once, but you can buy both of them.
Yeah.
So the first one is basically, they've called it the regular bundle, and it's basically going to give you 50 packs of the Doomsday, and then you get a random golden legendary, and you get a card back. Whereas and this is probably, based on previous pre-orders, this is probably going to be $50 US.
Yeah, that's our guess at least.
Yeah, that's our rough guess. Nothing's been confirmed. And then they have a Mega, which is going to give you 80 packs. You also get a random golden legendary, the card back, and you also get a Warlock Hero skin. I think it's Mecha Jaraxxus. And so, because this is the first time they've actually introduced this sort of thing, I can only estimate, can guess that it's going to be 60, maybe $70 US.
Yeah.
It will be I don't think it will be more than $70.
Yeah.
But
I personally think it'll be like 60 for this and 40 for the regular, because I can't see them going back to 50 for 50 when in the last expansion they gave us $50 for 70 packs.
Okay, that's true.
So
yeah,
that's my guess. But at this point, pricing hasn't been confirmed. In fact, this whole expansion, I don't even believe was intended to be announced today. It seems like
it seems like it was an accidental leak almost. Yeah,
but a big leak. Like a lot of stuff got leaked. It wasn't just like some small info about it. I mean, every card, the whole video, I suppose, that had contained all the information.
And even the website. But now, if you try to access the website, you can't access it anymore. The video, I think, has been hidden or whatever. So, no one's sure if this was intentional, or like if it was, a slight mess up from their side.
Yeah.
But so a lot of this stuff, like the prices hasn't been officially announced.
Yeah.
But
what we do know is the reveal stream is going to be on the 23rd of July. At 7 o'clock or 1900 hours CEST, which is the same as South African Standard Time at that time, I believe. I don't think there's any daylight savings effect there. And the release is scheduled according to the post that was kind of, I think, screen capped and removed afterwards, is the 7th of August. So that's very soon after that release date. That's basically just 2 weeks after the reveal stream. So that's going to be very interesting to see. That's going to be a very, very short release period of seeing lots of cards. I imagine they're still going to want to give out a similar number of cards. How they're going to manage that, I have no idea. But I'm happy to see the expansion coming sooner rather than later. As even though the meta right now is actually not that bad, we're seeing new decks come out, and it's actually kind of interesting. I think there are a lot of people out there that do really want the new content to come sooner rather than later, and obviously, we all want lots of new shiny cards to play with.
Yeah, just another word about even though the release date's announced as 7th of August, they did say PST, which is Pacific Standard Time, which basically means that for us here in South Africa, it's probably going to be closer to like it will be the 7th of August, like late afternoon, evening.
Yeah.
You know, if you can log on, like because we always know, you know, Blizzard's servers kind of get all like crash when it comes to new expansion releases.
Yeah, although they have been good of recent times. I mean, the 7th of August is also a Tuesday, so that usually fits with their release schedule. I mean, they usually release on Tuesday. Actually, they usually release on like Thursdays, right?
Yeah.
Usually patches are on Tuesdays, but
we're a bit lucky in the fact that you know, 9th of August is South African public holiday. That's kind of the first thing that I kind of like. I was like, hey.
Nice.
Yeah.
Take the 8th off, and you can just play Hearthstone for like 2 days straight.
And another thing that it looks like they're repeating is if you log in within like the first couple days, you get 3 free packs and a random class legendary minion. So you get one of the scientists. So that kind of seems to be a recurring theme, which is nice. Is basically you get a free of one of their sort of headlining legendary themes, right? So like it was the weapon, then last Witchwood. Do we get any? It wasn't a specific. It was just a random legendary. Hey.
Yeah, Witchwood was just random legendary.
Because one of them was a random weapon. When there was a set with weapons, it was you got a random weapon.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of exciting news. I mean, all of this information we got today, and a lot of it's actually quite difficult to verify because, like we say, from Blizzard's side, they've kind of done everything in their power to actually erase it from their sites and things.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on to the other news, which was actually going to be the main. Well, actually, first of all, I mean, any other closing thoughts on this expansion as a whole? I'm pretty excited. I like the theme and everything. And obviously, we don't really know. Yeah, we don't know
I'm
enough about
excited for science.
Sure.
Not biased at all.
Not biased at all, no. So moving on to what was actually meant to be our main news piece until this an announcement leak about the Boomsday project came out, and that was going to be the type changes. So and quite a unexpected move. They're changing the types of a couple cards. We'll go through them, you know, in the order that they'll affect standard at least. So first of all, Mountain Giant. Mountain Giant is changing to an elemental. Probably not a very large effect. In standard, it'll affect, you know, Servant of Kalimos discovers. You can obviously discover it from that, as well as Earthen Might. The Shaman spell, you can now get Mountain Giants, which I think on average is bad for most decks. I think the only deck that really cares about the Mountain Giant in a positive way is like a very slow mage deck.
With Frostless Jaina, your Mountain Giant will now have lifesteal.
Yeah. Or I suppose in an elemental deck, if you evolve into Mountain Giant, you get some Earthen Might possibilities if it's not like, you know, if it's just an elemental deck, not like an even shaman or anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Mountain Giant theoretically can go an even shaman, right? But how often you actually have enough cards in your hand to make Mountain Giant playable is debatable.
You'd rather just play Sea Giant.
Yeah, which is not going to be an elemental, by the way.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have Witchwood Piper, one of the other cards in Standard. It's just becoming a demon. I think maybe there's some possibilities in Zoo to bring back kind of demon-specific buffing options and to play this as a draw. But largely, I don't see that happening. I think this card is going to remain
as played as it is, basically.
Yeah, basically. Like, I don't think it's actually going to affect its how often it's played.
Then they've also made some more. I mean, as we move to like the next one, we talk about a lot of them are from Wild. So they also changed Molten Giant to Elemental. I don't think that affects. Basically, it will have a similar effect in Wild that Mountain Giant. It kind of dilutes your pool in terms of like elemental options, but I don't think it. The decks that played Molten Giant will continue to do it, and like it's not. I don't think you're gonna now play it in elemental decks for most reasons because most elemental decks generally tend to be more tempo orientated, and Molten Giant is not really a tempo card because it's a card you only ever play when you're on the back foot a lot of the times, or in mega decks. But I think that also got nerfed a while ago.
Yeah, that did with the last round of nerfs.
And then there's some random other ones where Jungle Moonkin is no longer a beast. for consistency. The card almost saw zero play.
Yeah, so card from League of Explorers. So I mean, it's in Wild. It's for those that don't remember, it's a 4-mana 4/4 that gives both players spell damage +2. Yeah, there was almost no play for that. Maybe some Wild combo decks it could see play in the future, maybe. But overall, I mean, a pretty irrelevant
doesn't
change.
Make a change.
Yeah,
like there were not many reasons why because Beast Druid was not a thing.
No, not really. And I mean, sure, taking one more beast away from Druids is probably not going to help Beast Druid, but ultimately they're going to be getting a bunch of new cards in Wild when we get new expansions and stuff. So eventually, maybe they can make it work.
And then North Sea Kraken. So for those of you who don't remember, a 9-mana 9/7 with battle card deal 4 damage. So it now becomes a beast after all this time. Basically, you only ever really played it in Arena. It was never really a constructed card. Yeah. So also once again, more just a consistency change more than like it literally makes no difference to Nelly. I mean, you could maybe in Wild with Rexar you can discover that plus Stone Tusk Boar, right, for the lols.
Yeah. No, you can't because Rexar doesn't offer more than 5 cost beasts, so it literally doesn't even affect Rexar.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
And then the final change.
Yeah, the final change is Witchwood Grizzly's artwork is changing. This is actually the most unprecedented change. They've changed types before. They've never changed artwork of a card, right?
Yeah, this is very weird.
And this is like because they didn't want to make the type change, right? It's because people argued that it's spectral and therefore not a beast, like let's say the spiders that came from Haunted Creeper, for those who maybe remember that.
Yes.
And therefore it shouldn't be a beast. So all they did was they made it look less spectral, and therefore it looks more like a normal grizzly, but it's kind of blue.
Yeah, they basically just shaded in, they colored in brown.
Yeah, they basically just colored it in with fur.
I'll be honest, I prefer the older artwork.
I'll wait to see how it looks in game, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose, I don't know. Whatever. It's less scary, but I don't know.
But ultimately, it doesn't affect anything. Literally, the change is purely visually, that's it.
Yeah. And I mean, the interesting thing is, like, Office is the other example of a kind of a beast that's actually undead, that's in Standard. In particular, but it's kind of qualified as a beast, even though it is kind of undead, which is similar to Spectral, but they left it as a beast and they didn't want to change its theme because they couldn't change its art by just coloring it in because of its theme with Lich King and stuff as well, and they didn't want to change it to not being a beast because of its impact on Deathstalker Rexar, so they're leaving that kind of known inconsistency. Overall, I think most of these changes are pretty good, right? They're just cleaning up consistency. I can't say I'm upset about any of them. Some people get excited about the Mountain Giant Elemental thing, and maybe that's the most relevant one, specifically in Standard, but overall, pretty low impact.
Very minor changes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean that basically sums up essentially what they announced. I was gonna say balance changes, but more just patch.
Yeah. And then next up, we are going to be discussing some decks. So this was going to be probably a longer segment before all the news announcement stuff came out, but we still want to be bringing you some decks every week that you can try out on ladder. The big thing that people are getting really excited about right now is this Magma Zoo deck. I've been playing a bunch of it myself. I got 2 decks on screen here. The slightly more budget and more consistent option, honestly, that caps out at Leroy Jenkins. And then the version I've been playing, because I have Glinda, I certainly wouldn't have crafted it for this deck, but because I have it, I've been playing with Glinda and the Sea Giant as well. You know, the obvious synergies with Glinda is playing a bunch of free happy ghouls, where if you can heal in the same turn, so you play Glinda and then you get a healing effect from something like Voodoo Doctor or Life Drinker if your Glinda sticks. I've done that before. Or Fungal Enchanter, and then you can play a bunch of free happy ghouls. I have only once pulled off playing multiple Sea Giants. I played 4 Sea Giants once with Glinda. But overall, Glinda's just kind of a threat that gives you a little bit more late game option. And I like Sea Giants in the deck because of the popularity of other board-based decks. You get to play Sea Giants, which are pretty powerful. So, I mean, that's kind of why I like that deck. I think the highest win rate one that I know reached rank 1 legend was actually not running Leroy, instead running double Doomguard. So that's, unsurprising. But, we see some, like, healing-based synergy beyond just the kind of Glinda thing. Beyond just Happy Ghoul. There's also, like, Light Wardens in the deck, which is an interesting inclusion to see, right?
Yeah, especially in Warlock,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, what a world we live in, in 2018, where Light Warden and Voodoo Doctor are in tier 1 Warlock decks. What a time.
Yeah, and I mean, that's because you have these cards like Flame Imp and Cobalt Librarian that you can slap down early on that get you the damage on yourself that can enable like really early Happy Ghouls with the Voodoo Doctor, or buffing Light Wardens a lot. I mean, Fungal Enchanter is one of the best ways to possibly buff Light Warden. I mean, a game I was playing today against like a Taunt Druid, he played like a Primordial Drake, and my Light Warden had been buffed by Keleseth, so it survived. And I had like 4 minions on the board, dropped Fungal Enchanter, and just traded the Light Warden into the Primordial Drake because it had like 10 attack. So yeah, sometimes those kind of things happen. Light Warden is kind of okay. Most of all, the one big tip I would have for this deck is not to kind of just try and, like, in your mulligan, don't keep Happy Ghoul and Voodoo Doctor independently. And even if you have them together, you still need another way to damage yourself. Otherwise, you're starting off the game too slow. Don't go for the big combo. Just play it like a normal Zoo deck and get those extra tempo turns of playing out the Happy Ghoul. The best thing to compare Happy Ghoul to is probably something like Silverware Golem.
Yeah. And, I mean, people were trying combos of that, I think, in Priest. But, like, now Warlock, I'm a bit surprised, but it's interesting to see Zoo making a comeback.
Yeah.
One of the most played decks now, I believe.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's because it's a newer deck than most of what people are seeing, so a lot of people are jumping on it to play it. It is relatively cheap, especially if you look at the version here that just has Keleseth and Leroy as the only legendaries. It has no epics in it. In fact, the only epics in the other deck as well are just Sea Giants, and then it has an extra Glinda. It's possible to definitely play like the Sea Giant list without the Glinda if you want. I mean, overall, you can see the lists are very, very similar card for card. I mean, the cards that are removed to make space for the Glinda and Sea Giants is just one Fungal Enchanter, one Life Drinker, and one Spellbreaker. The difference between these two lists. So the core package there is mostly just commons, honestly, and then a couple rares. So it's definitely a very accessible deck for players as well.
Oh, and speaking of, literally, Hearthstone while we're recording this, has just released the update with basically talking about the new expansion, as well as these card changes we've just been talking about, and the Midsummer Fire Festival is returning.
Oh wow! Okay.
So,
breaking news.
Sorry, breaking news. Literally, as we're recording, my Hearthstone just popped up with Hearthstone has started an update. So I was like, oh, let's read the patch notes, and yeah, a lot of these things are happening right now, basically.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, they're just confirming that the Midsummer Fire Festival. People were speculating as to whether that would return or not, and it seems like it will be. With a new Tavern Brawl, a PvE Tavern Brawl. So that's obviously one where players can group up against. PvE stands for Player versus Environment, so it can group up against some kind of boss. Basic daily quests will completed during the Fire Festival will reward double gold, and you'll get Fire Festival themed greetings and emote box decorations. I must say, after the Taverns of Time ended, the thing I was most sad about was the quests changing back to normal quests. I've been pretty much hating all those quests, so now that we know we're going to be getting new quests in the future, well, not necessarily new quests, but quests are at least going to be giving us double the reward. That's pretty cool to know, especially now that everyone's going to be saving up for Boomsday. So, I mean, that's really cool. And actually pretty good timing in that context. So, save your quests for now. We're not actually 100% sure when that's good. Is that hitting? Well, actually, we don't know. It's not in the patch notes exactly when the festival's going to
But
start.
I'm assuming, well, it's a very similar time to last year. I can't remember when because it
Yeah.
coincides with some normal fest, like some real life sort of event. I'm
Yeah,
not quite sure like how it works, because obviously, like the Northern Hemisphere, their seasons are obviously different to ours. So
yeah. I mean, the key thing here is just keep 2 quests in your quest log if possible, you know,
yeah,
and like leave those class quests that you're not going to play, and then keep 2 in the quest log, and then when it starts, you'll get your fresh quest every day. You'll get the fresh quest, and then on that first day, you'll be able to complete all 3 and get a little bit of extra gold. So
yeah.
and then we have one other deck we're going to talk
Oh
about
yes, yeah. We
briefly.
got a bit distracted.
And that is Malygos Druid. This is a much more expensive deck with many more legendaries in it. Well, actually, yeah, 5 legendaries total, and just basically a lot more epics. Cards like Ultimate Infestation, Branching Paths, Arcane Tyrant, which have been pretty consistent in a lot of Druid decks for a while. So they are epics that more people will at least have. But this is a deck both of us have been playing quite a bit. I think you've been enjoying it recently as well.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. It's one of the decks I kind of wanted to improve more myself. It's quite a fun. It's one of those fun decks to play. And even though like initially you look at it as a combo deck, most of the times you actually don't win by the combo. You win just by like either outlasting them or by just beating them in the face. And so that's the nice thing about the deck, is it's just overall quite resilient. I think against, you basically have win conditions against aggressive decks, you have win condition against slower decks, and I think that's actually what we're going to talk about in a bit.
Yeah.
It's knowing when to shift gears.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing with that Malygos Druid that you're talking about. You have key cards like Spreading Plague that are excellent against aggro decks, which decks like Taunt Druid don't run. And you have late game finishing options like Malygos and the combo against slow decks that something like Token Druid doesn't have. So it's a Druid deck that really manages to ride that balance by being okay against aggro decks and being decent against the slow control decks as well. It can beat a deck like even Warlock where Token Druid can't, but it can also beat Odd Paladin where Taunt Druid will suffer against that deck, especially because it doesn't have Spreading Plague. So I think that's a key factor that's actually making the deck pretty good even for laddering. Particularly when there's a lot of decks like even Warlock around and Shadowwalk Shaman. You also aren't like super vulnerable to that kind of Shadowwalk Shaman unless they're getting unless they have weapon removal, because Twig is definitely something you want to be able to pull off in the slower matchups. I mean, the big combo, right, is swinging with your playing Malygos, swinging with your last charge of Twig, Faceless Manipulatoring your Malygos, playing a swipe and double Moonfire. That's the big combo. But it's not always about the combo, as you mentioned, and that kind of leads us to our tip for this week, which is when you're playing these kind of combo decks, realizing when not to combo, or realizing when you need the combo and when you don't. So it's a case of looking at matchups and realizing when you actually need to have is the key way you're going to win that matchup, right? With a deck that is kind of fluid like this.
So the best example really is, so like in very slow matchups where you're going to need the full combo, you're going to, a lot of times you're going to save your Moonfires, your swipes, your Moonfire, swipe, Malygos, and Faceless, and the Twig you're going to kind of save for that one major, OTK turn. Whereas, against aggressive decks, as soon as you realize you're playing against aggressive decks, like it's more correct and it will keep you alive by using your Moonfires and swipes, to kill minions. So like we're talking about this Medic Zoo. As soon as you realize you're playing against Zoo, you should start. You can use your swipe 3D to just try to clear the board and stay alive.
Yeah, and you can use the Moonfire to kill off some of their 2/1s, or to help facilitate clears alongside something like your swipe.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of the key is how much damage do you need in your combo turn? Like, are they a deck that has armor gain, like another Druid deck? And if they are, you kind of want to find ways to keep their armor down throughout the game so you don't have to do it all in one massive burst. And or are they a deck that's going to hurt themselves, like Warlock, where you actually don't need that much damage? Or are they a deck like Rogue, where they don't have any healing, so any damage you do, even if it's just chip damage with the hero power, can stick? Realizing those kind of things is very important in a deck like this, and in general, when playing any kind of decks that have this style of winning in very different ways against different matchups.
Yeah, and I mean, on the flip side, it is one of the most satisfying is when you do actually get to pull off, like a super wombo combo. So, like, the most notable thing for me happened the other day, I was playing against a Dead Man's Hand warrior that decided to play 2 Bring It Ons when I had Malygos and Faceless in hand.
Oof.
So, even though sure they gained 20 armor, what happened next was Malygos for for 5 mana, Faceless for 1 mana. And then it was my twig, so I had like double swap, double moonfire for like 50, like it was like 50 damage basically.
Because each swipe is doing 14, each moonfire is doing 11.
I killed her. So OTK, that was one of the more amusing games I've had. But the deck can surprisingly.
Yeah, and with those kind of how much damage you do, specific to this deck as well, you have like Alexstrasza, which is useful for getting down the health total preemptively, especially if they've been armoring since the beginning of the game and you haven't actually touched their health total. If you're Alex them for 15, that makes a huge difference. And then also like Lich King can give you the Death Coil in particular is excellent because that's basically a 2-mana Pyroblast with Malygos on the board.
I heard 2-mana Pyroblast is pretty good as well.
Yeah. Okay. Any other tips on this with these kind of decks?
Well, I think another thing is still with Malygos Druid, it's things like branching paths. Yeah. That's kind of the branching paths and Nourish are kind of in nearly any card with choices. Like I think it becomes knowing when to use which option. And it's quite difficult at times because, sometimes with branching paths, you need the armor to stay alive. Sometimes you need the card draw. But the problem is, in a lot of times, you don't want to draw too many cards because, then you can't play, Ultimate Infestation. Yeah. So that's always kind of the balance. And like Nourish as well. Most of the times you play it for mana, but there are times where you will Nourish just to draw cards.
Yeah, but there are certain matchups like, let's say, Shadowhawk Shaman, where they will win in the ultra late game if they get their combo off before you. And in those cases, sometimes I often find myself drawing with Nourish or drawing with Branching Paths, just to try and get to cards like Twig early on, because Twig is obviously super important for if you are trying to rush the combo in any way like that. So those are important things to note. Whereas in like matchups against aggro decks, I'm generally going to probably Branching Paths for armor a lot more often, and Nourish to try and get to my Malfurion faster.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of those come with like experience and also kind of watching like pros and like looking at the statistics a lot of the time, I think.
Yeah. But there's also some other decks, another Druid deck as well to consider, and a matchup from HCT Italy that is a particularly good example of this is Token Druid. We saw a Token Druid mirror there between Muzzy and Just Saying. And one of the important things is like knowing when to use, let's say, Whispering Woods without using Soul of the Forest. Which matchups you have to take the risk in, where sometimes there might be a deck that has lots of board clears, but you have to take the risk that they don't have them early on when you play your first Whispering Woods, perhaps, just so that you can try and get some damage through with Savage Roar, or maybe you need to combo it over 2 turns and you just play your Soul of the Forest in the next turn. It's very important to realize what the matchups are and when to use these combos and when not to.
Yeah, and that's where I think but like that's also where practicing comes in, and like a lot of these practice groups where they literally play a matchup like 50, 100 times and then try and work out what is the best like sort of line to go for, Are they going for like a faster, like a sort of a more aggressive line, or are they going for like a fatigue line? Was it an old HCT where we saw two players basically like with it was a token druid mirror where they basically like did nothing, and they basically just like chilled and they did like nothing for a long time.
Yeah, it was a game that was like very well talked about, but I mean the common belief amongst players is that both of them were wrong to do that basically now, with people having practiced and tested that matchup more. And I mean that's one of the interesting things is seeing how these intricate plans in specific matchups change over time as more people practice them, more focus is put on them. I think that matchup in particular, people put a lot of focus on it because of that mirror, because of that example that we saw, and that's why people have really refined and improved how to play in these matchups. So knowing these kind of matchups, and specifically with combo decks, I mean we're talking about when to combo and when not to combo, that's really important to keep yourself from raging, for our Magma Rages tip to keep you from raging for this week.
Yep.
And speaking of, these HCT events and esports, we do have some esports news. We had the HCT Summer Championships over the weekend before last. And the big storyline from there was Europe's dominance. The only reason we didn't see 4 European players qualify was because 2 of them played each other in the quarterfinals. So, we had 3 European players qualifying for Worlds. A83650. Hopefully I got that right, actually. Viper and Bunny Hopper. Viper and Bunny Hopper both being from Germany. A83650 is from Poland, if I'm not mistaken. Although I think they're all... Well, actually, A83650 lives in Germany, but Bunny Hopper lives in Oslo. Anyway, all have some kind of connection to Germany, interestingly. And then Killing All Day, the one American player making it through. So even though Latin America had like more players than it's ever had at this tour stop, unfortunately none qualifying for them. And some of the Asia Pacific and China hopefuls also kind of suffering. So, I mean, I think this kind of reiterates the thing a lot of people have been talking about how strong the European region is and the depth that it has as well.
Oh, definitely.
And then we saw another HCT event happening in Europe over this last weekend. That was HCT Italy. We're going to bring a special guest on next week to chat a little bit more about the event and give us the inside scoop. But the key talking point from this was Hunter Ace getting the victory again, pretty much. His second HCT tour stop already this year after winning HCT Seoul. And his 4th top 4, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, something insane.
It's just ridiculous consistency. I mean, to all those people that kind of think that, Hearthstone's just a game about getting lucky. I mean, these kind of results, really fly in the face of that. I mean, Hunter Ace is going to be killing everyone in last call kind of points now. And he's like absolutely killing it in these tournaments, just having such great performances. I mean, we saw quite a few other players also making multiple top 6 or another top 16 for this year. We saw Muzzy and Just Saying playing it against each other in the quarterfinals, which was a great match that we mentioned a little bit earlier. And we also saw Casey making another top 16 after making a DreamHack Tours as well. And then there was also a bunch of new players. So, I mean, it's good to see, this competition in the European region. And outside of Muzzy and Just Saying, pretty much everyone else in that top 16 was European, as you would kind of expect it for a tour stop actually happening in Europe. It's a little bit sad we don't get more Asia Pacific players, I think, traveling to these kind of tour stops. I think that would really help them. Obviously, it's just the financial aspect, and even more of the other American players as well, or Latin America and Americas. I know for the Latin America players, obviously, it's also very costly because of currency and stuff. Something we're very familiar with here in South Africa.
Definitely. Yeah.
And one other thing, another little piece of news we got as we were recording this is we do actually have confirmation on the pricing for those bundles that will be for the pre-order deals for the Boomsday project. I need to get used to saying that. Do you want to just tell us exactly what the pricing is going to be for that 50 pack and 80 pack bundle?
So the regular bundle, it's going to be $50 or 50 euros, and the mega bundle is going to be 80, which I'm a bit surprised that it's that expensive.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so a bit disappointed, but I mean, yeah. And it has definitely been confirmed. You can buy both for $130. No discount, unfortunately. If you want to splash out, and you get 2 golden legendaries, and you get the hero skin. So yeah, Blizzard know how to roll in the money.
I'm pretty disappointed in that pricing. If I'm honest, I am not happy about that. But we'll see. I mean, I'm probably still gonna buy it because the amount of Hearthstone I play, this is something that we kind of put a lot of time into. But I'm still pretty disappointed on it, if I'm honest. So a little bit of a disappointing way to end it, but I'm still excited about the new expansion.
And Amazon coins is the cheapest way to get the packs and cards.
Yeah, we need to get an affiliate link for that for
exactly.
Rangers with how much we promote it anyway.
Exactly.
If you want to give us any feedback, of course, on the expansion, your thoughts on any of the cards, any of these decks, be sure to leave a comment on the YouTube video. You can also reach out to us on Twitter. You can find myself, Dib_gaming on Twitter, and you can find Pandemonia at PandemoniaZA on Twitter. So reach out to us there. We really appreciate any feedback, and we also would love to hear if there's anything you want us to talk about for future tips, or any specific decks you want us to talk about in the future. I imagine soon after that, especially after that first reveal stream, we're definitely going to be talking about the new expansion a lot. But until then, make sure you get your questions in for next week, where we'll have a little bit more time to talk about those kind of things. So yeah, I mean, if there are just any other general questions as well, feel free to ask us there. There's a decent chance we'll just answer directly on Twitter anyway, if you ask us questions on Twitter. But if you want us to specifically answer them on the podcast in a kind of more long-form discussion, then we definitely can. So make sure you reach out to us there. Thanks a lot, everyone, for tuning in. Cheerio.
Cheerio.